Okay, morning, church. Let's get our Bibles open, as Hunter mentioned to us, and Belina as well. Today is what we call, in our tradition, Reformation Sunday, and we'll make sense of that in a bit. But if you've got your Bibles opened to chapter 1 in Paul's letter to the Romans, if you're using a Bible that's out there, I think it's page 1126. If you're using an electronic device or you're with us virtually, I encourage you to use the NIV simply because that's what I have, and it's just nice to have the same wording. We're going to read this, and then I'm going to provide the context for it a little bit later in the morning. So we're going to pick up in verse 8 in Romans chapter 1. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is being reported all over the world. God, whom I serve in my spirit in preaching the gospel of his Son, is my witness how constantly I remember you in my prayers at all times. And I pray that now at last, by God's will, the way be opened for me to come to you. I long to see you so that I may impart to you some spiritual gift to make you strong. That is, that you and I may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith. I don't want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that I planned many times to come to you, but I have been prevented from doing so until now, in order that I might have a harvest among you, just as I have had a harvest among the other Gentiles. I'm obligated both to Greeks and non-Greeks, both to the wise and the foolish. That is why I'm so eager to preach the gospel to you who are in Rome. For I'm not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew and then to the Gentile. For in the gospel the righteousness of God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. That's the word of the Lord. So, a rather unconnected but connected. I had an interesting thing happen to me this week. Like 4 or 5 people, I got to count it out, came and asked me the same question, which is really rare to have the same question. And all 4 of them were asking me basically, is it okay to go see The Conjuring or to watch The Conjuring? If you know it, it's like at the ninth one or something like that. And the question was actually a really deep question, like how is it that we, as Christians, are we supposed to be part of, or to take part of, or to watch or observe these kinds of, the things that are kind of the Halloween kinds of stuff and all, right? And I'm not going to cover that directly, but what we're going to talk about today, I think will provide an answer for you. Because the truth is, we live, as the Bible tells us, in different worlds. And those worlds come together. Paul says to the Ephesians, we don't just fight this world as it is, or we don't just live in this world as it is, but there's a world of powers and principalities and how those things come. Okay, may not make sense, hope it will in a bit. But here's the thing. A few months ago, Emily Mitchell, a good friend and member of our congregation, mailed me this book. It is by Charles Duhigg, and it's called Super Communicators. It's not a faith-based book, but it is. I've read it, I think, probably 8 or 9 times since I've gotten it. Duhigg became really well known for writing a bestseller called The Power of Habit. So this is sort of not a sequel, but something that follows it. And in it, he really talks about how we can learn to become better communicators, super communicators, whether it be in our workplace, whether it be that we are selling something, whether it be in our families, whether it be in our courts, whatever it may be, that we can become better communicators. And the prologue is actually, I think, the best part of the book for me, even though I love the whole book, because he tells the story of a guy named Felix Sigela. Felix Sigela is the most respected negotiator for the FBI, whether it be hostage negotiation or whatever it may be. He's the most respected. And as people start to talk, any kind of gathering, Duhigg said his name would come up. And so he decided he'd go meet him, and he did. And he's not who you would think, as Duhigg would say. He's not, a big, tall, great voice or anything. He's just kind of a middle-aged, kind of a little bit of a belly, kind of a mustache little guy. But what makes him so effective? So effective that actually social scientists interview him to try to study how it is that he's so good at what he does. And one of the things that he actually did was he once persuaded a man who had barricaded himself in a room with 6 cobras, 19 rattlesnakes, and an iguana to come out peacefully, and then name his accomplices in the animal smuggling ring. Felix said this, quote, "The key was getting him to see things from the snake's perspective. He was a little weird, but he genuinely loved animals." The whole mystery is this. He finds ways to connect to you. He finds a way to bring his world to your world, or to bring your world to his. And it's really fascinating when you start to think about that. It's not manipulative, it's not dishonest, it's always transparent, but it's a way to find these connections, or to be able to say that here's my world, here's your world. What do we have in common? How can we make that work? Some years ago, I had several encounters with a young African-American guy from Norfolk named Nick Edgerton, and I will never forget it. Nick was really interested. He's a young guy who's trying to figure out how to organize people for good things, and how to bring change into the community and all of this. And I was intrigued with him. And over lunch one day, I asked him, I said, "Nick, what is it that enables you or empowers you or encourages you to try to look at the concerns of race or ethnicities or social backgrounds or economic backgrounds? What is it that you envision in that?" And he looked at me, and he was speaking off the cuff, but he said this. He said, "My vision is to be able to dig canals between all the different bodies of water." Now, I've heard people for years talk about building bridges. But to dig a canal is very different than build a bridge, by the way. To build a bridge is to say, here's my body of water, and here's yours, and we're going to find a way to walk over back and forth. So we might have some relationship, but it's still my body of water, and this is still your body of water, and here's the bridge. To dig a canal, to dig a trench, is very different. A channel. Because once you do that, something of your world starts to become shared with this world. And something of this world starts to get shared of your world. And there's still your body of water, but there's something different. And I've been fascinated by that, and I've thought about what Nick told me those years ago over and over and over. Because the truth is, we all live in multiple worlds simultaneously. We live in a world that maybe it's my work world. Maybe it's my family world. Maybe it's my church world. Maybe it's my politics world. Maybe it's my school world. We all live in these worlds, and they in some ways we bounce from one to the other. In fact, the great temptation for us is to bounce back and forth between these worlds. And when we do that, it ultimately fails. It ultimately fails. I'm going to give you a life example from my life. I've shared this with some of you. This was one of the seminal moments in my faith development. I came to Christ in my mid-20s through Cheryl, and she got me going to church, and I didn't know the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament. So we joined a church, and what did they do? They asked us to lead the youth, which is like, holy moly, why would you do that? But, so we go and start leading the youth. Now, Cheryl's grounded in faith and all of that, but I'm just reading the stories with the kids and kind of learning as we go. And I just fell in love, not only with those kids, but I was really falling in love with the faith, with Jesus, with the church, and all that was there. And it was really having a huge impact on my life. But I was still working, running a restaurant chain, had a number of restaurants, and I was living in that world. I was actually pretty good in that world. I mean, I knew how to read spreadsheets. I was doing really well in there, and I was tough in that world. And one day, at the Dutch Square Mall in Columbia, South Carolina, a group of my managers and a group of my youth group kids met each other. Weird connection, no real reason, no nothing, but somehow they met each other, and my name came up. And none of the managers could believe that I was who the kids said I was. And none of the kids could believe who the manager said I was. And I came to realize in that moment that though I thought I was growing in my faith and I thought something was happening for me and all, that I was a fraud to myself. That what I was doing was I was trying to grow in my faith over here and like, oh, I'm so loving these kids and I'm investing in them and look at what we're doing and all like that. But I was over here still doing the same stuff that was certainly not faith-based in any way. And I think that moment for me became something that I've struggled with and I've tried to work with the rest of my life. You never get it right 100%. We're sinful. But the goal to be a person, to be a man where I'm the same in both, or at least there's something of, because when we try to just cross over, when we try to live these separate lives, it's always going to fail for us. And the same thing for you. Right? If you're different in one place than you are in the other place. But a lot of young Navy folks, and especially the young guys, when they come and I hang out with them, and they'll start to tell me a story, and then they'll get to a word, and then they realize they probably shouldn't say that word, so they stop and try to come up with another word. Or more recently, it's been like they start spelling the word. And I'm like, well, you just spelled it, so like, why can't you say it, you know? But it's like, okay, no, you're here. I'm here in the church. I'm here in this. I'm here over here. So we live in these worlds, right? We get that. What's the Bible say? The Bible says, yes, we definitely do. From the very beginning, Abraham is called to go from this place to that place. Different people, different topography, different everything. Same thing from Moses, go from here to here to here to here. Or you get to Jesus, and Jesus really kind of hits it head on. You remember the story where they come and they try to trick Jesus, and they say, should we pay our taxes to Caesar? You remember what Jesus does? Jesus is great at never answering a question that's asked. He says, give me a coin. And he takes the coin, he holds up, he says, whose face is on this side? Caesar's. He says, okay, give to Caesar what's Caesar's, give to God what's God's. I'm like, whoa. Did he answer me? No, he didn't answer me. But he's giving me something to... But what Jesus is saying is that we're going to live in these two worlds, and there are times that we really need to be. We need to be good citizens. We need to live faithfully in our lives, but we also still live in this kingdom. Now, when you get to what we read in Romans today, and this passage in Romans, there's two verses in here dominate the Protestant world. One of them is about first to the Jews and then to the Gentiles. I'm going to leave that topic to other people at many other times. But the central one is when Paul says, the righteous live by faith. That passage has been seminal to who we are in our faith. And it comes from the Apostle Paul as he writes a letter to a church in Rome that he doesn't know anyone really in leadership, but he desires to go there. And Paul knows that church is made up not of Jews mostly, but primarily of Gentiles. So when Paul writes, he is going to write a letter that's going to try to convince them of what matters or to show and talk to them and teach them. Now, Paul lives in two worlds very clearly. Really three, but two. First off, Paul is a man from Tarsus. Tarsus, at that point, would be called Syria. Now it's probably in Turkey, but it's up above. It was one of the three most prominent Roman provinces of the time. Huge wealth, commerce, a lot of money, a lot of really, really, really rich people. And Paul is a citizen of Rome. Now, this is something that I didn't cover this in seminary, but this is really critical. He's a citizen of Rome. That means that he can't be scourged without being convicted. It means that if he's arrested, he can appeal and go all the way to Caesar. It's estimated that in the Roman Empire, less than 10% of the population were citizens. Okay? So he's in the top 10%. But it's also estimated that in Tarsus, only 1% to 3% of the population were citizens. So Paul is in the 1%. And that 1% is rich, and it has influence, and it has power. It has all the control of everything is in that 1%er in Tarsus. And Paul's a part of it. Not only is Paul a citizen, his dad was a citizen. That ranks him even higher. So he comes from the most prominent, influential families amongst the 1% in that entire region. Well, not only that, Paul is also a Jew. And being a Jew and having wealth, we assume, because he's in the 1%, and having all this kind of prominence, what does his dad do? His dad sends him off to the best schools. So he sends him to Jerusalem, and he sends him to the school of Gamaliel, who is the Pharisee, the teacher that's there, and he's the most famous at the time. And Paul studies under Gamaliel. It would be like sending your kid to Harvard as a legacy, right? And so he goes, and he learns all of that. And so we start to recognize that Paul, here he is, he's amongst the persecuted people, the Jews, especially when he's in Jerusalem, and yet he's among the 1%ers when it comes to the Roman Empire. And Paul is balancing, he's living between these two different worlds. Are we together? And then he comes to Christ. He persecutes the Christians. He hates them until the Holy Spirit comes. He's not blind. All of that story about Paul. He comes to Christ, and then he starts to say, well, now what can I do? And Paul becomes a super communicator. He becomes the one that's able to bring the world of the persecuted, the world of the downtrodden, the world of those who don't fit, the world of the Jews at the time, and he is able to bring the world of the 1%ers, and he finds a way to bring that together, and he does it through the gospel of Jesus Christ. That becomes his channel. And it's fascinating how he works. So Paul is trying to figure out, how do I communicate to these Romans? Now here's what I would do if I was writing Rome. I would start out and say, hi, I'm Paul, a Roman citizen. Because if I said that, everybody would listen. So like if I was going to start out and I would say, I want to communicate to people in Charlottesville, I would do like Wahoo or something. I'd let them know where I was from, or I'd say Roll Tide, or I'd do something, or, Hokie Nation or whatever. Just to kind of, wouldn't even really have to do much with it, but I just let you know, this is who I am. I got some street cred with you. He never does that to the Romans. He says, I'm from the line of David. And they're Gentiles. And he doesn't do it because he wants to get this one thing across. And he says it in chapter 1, verse 17. It's a quote from Habakkuk in the Old Testament, and it permeates everything else in all the letter. He says of this, it's a righteousness that is from faith to faith at last. Just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith alone. And Paul says to them very clearly, and then everything else in it is this, you live by faith. That faith is the channel, it's the canal, it's the waterway that connects all these different worlds for you, these different empires for you. That faith, which is the work of God, not the work of you. That faith is what shapes everything in your life, and that faith is what your priorities need to be. Because the key to life is to be able to sort your allegiances. To sort your allegiance to the work that you do, the school that you attend, the education that you might be, the family life that you have, the church life that you have, whatever that may be. You've got all these different kinds of empires, and how you sort those allegiances, because where you spend the most time will always win. Not what you want to win, not what you think is going to win, but where you spend the most time. And I don't mean just in hours. I mean in emotional and spiritual energy. What really matters to me? How important is it that I go to this school? How important is it that I have this career? How important is it that my neighbors see that I've achieved something? How important is it that I can get, how important is my faith? And where that takes our time and our energy, what wakes you up in the middle of the night, all of that is what's going to determine where your priorities are. And what Paul wants to say is, no, here's our priority. It's faith. The righteous will live by faith. All of the righteousness, the stuff that you do, it's all going to be based on just that faith, a simple faith. No works, no actions, no nothing. It's just that faith. And this is the passage that shaped Martin Luther in 1517 when he posted those 95 Theses on the door. All that great history, right? But the thing with Luther was part of the top 10%, maybe even the 1%. His dad was really wealthy. His dad wanted him to be a lawyer. That was a great job. Luther was on his way to do it. Gets struck in a thunderstorm knocked down off a horse. He thought he was going to die, and he cries out just in desperation, Lord, if you save me, I'll become a monk. I think partly because his dad wanted to be a lawyer, it was his way of saying, like, if you save me, I'm going to do what my dad doesn't want me to do, and then I'm going to win too. I really do think there's something in that for Luther. But what's he do? He's saved. He becomes a monk. He's smart. He's educated. He's got all this. He's starting to move up within the Augustinian order. All those kinds of things are happening to him. He goes to Rome, which is a big deal. You get invited to go to Rome. And he walks in and he sees all the gold and the silver and everything that's everywhere and all that's there. And it came to him immediately as he walked into that Sistine Chapel, all of that stuff. It came to him to realize that, all of that faith, all of that stuff that they talk about and preach about, all of that was to build this. The story is told that the Pope, maybe to Luther, so just a story, said, look at all that we have, the gold and silver. No longer can we say, neither gold nor silver have I, a passage in Acts. And Luther looks at the Pope and says, yes, but no longer can you say, pick up your mat and walk, which is in that same passage. Luther recognized that at that season and that time that the church had sold itself for the power of the world. And so for him, when he comes to this passage, the just shall live by faith alone, everything is shaped. Everything has changed. His allegiance has changed. Everything is shaped. And this is the key for us. This is the key for us, how we sort our allegiances. Where do we place our priorities as we raise our children? And I say this to you as parents, and please take it in the spirit of love, which means I'm going to knock you around a little bit, right? Okay. The only true goal that you should have as parents, the only one true goal should be that your child comes to know and treasure the love of Jesus Christ. Because at the end of the day, where they have gone to school, what major they have had, what career they've tracked, how many sports they've played, all of those things, as important as they may be, and they are, those things will all fade. And why do I say that that's the primary goal? Because every other goal should apply to that. How am I shaping the life of my child to know and to trust in the faith of God? Not works, not accomplishments, not those things. And once I do that, and once they're grounded in that way, all those other accomplishments, that success and all of those things, they all start to take shape and they become even more beautiful and more powerful because they're all done for something that's beyond just them. The key to life for us is to be able to ask the question why in everything that we do. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I in the career? What is there that I can do today that can proclaim the goodness of God? When I go to school and I hit a classroom, when I'm walking down the halls, when I'm whatever, how is that? Where is it that something of faith, the goodness of God comes? And so I come back to Felix with the FBI and Nick with all the work that his heart called him to do within our own city. And I realize that the great power that both of these men are teaching us and the great power that we learn not only from our Reformed tradition and the great power that we learn from the church and from the Bible is simply this, is that we are called to dig channels. Because when we are alive in the faith, when it is by faith, not by works, when I trust in the goodness of God, not by anything I've done or anything I haven't done, when I believe that He is in control and He is in power, when I trust and believe in that, then that canal starts to change and shape the waters that it hits. That living water. Now here's something I'm going to say, and you're going to challenge me to start with, but just listen to me and let me defend myself. The church is not, the Christian in this world is not called to change the world. Now, if you know me, that's counterintuitive because that's what I'm a lot about, right? Or I think I am. I try to be. I try for our church to be. That is not the purpose of the church or the Christian. We are not called to change the world. Instead, we are simply called to live by faith, to trust in Jesus, and to let that faith of the waters in which we inhabit our lives, let that seep and permeate into all the other waters of the world, and let Jesus bring that change. Does that mean we shouldn't have opinions on causes and things? No, not at all. That's not what I'm saying. But the church is not pimped out to politics. We bring something different, even from people whom we may agree. We bring something different, a why. A why that is truth and of hope and of promise. A why that says you don't have to work and achieve something and then be afraid that someone's going to take it from you, but a why that says you are loved. And this love of Christ, this love of God is what shapes everything. We are simply called as the church to bring Jesus. Even when we care, even when we do, even when we labor, it's to bring Jesus. So what about you in your life right now? I don't know. Maybe you're at Dutch Square Mall and you're recognizing that there's some things in your life and the different worlds you're living in, they don't go together. And you're going over and over the bridge and it's getting exhausting and worrying and maybe fearful. Or maybe there's something conjuring in your life right now that may be just as dangerous of letting some things, some ways just come. I don't know. But I know the answer. The answer has been for 2,000 years. Live by faith. Yeah. Trust in the goodness of God. Trust in the providence. Trust that at the end of the day, no matter what the world brings, there is a promise of a new day that will last forever, where every tear will be wiped, every word will be cleansed, and it will be nothing but goodness. Live by faith. Come on, Valena. Amen.